My ex-wife sat in front of me, weeping. "You must have had something left over from the divorce," I suggested, pushing a glass of water toward her. "After all, you got how much? $1,300,000 from the sale of my company and our house. We, invested it all in stocks, hoping for a good return, and lost most of it in the recession." Sandy blew out half a glass and mumbled weepily, alternately sobbing and sniffling. "Jed's been out of work for the last 6 months, and we've been spending money out of our savings and the tearful deluge just won't stop." "What do you want me to do?" I asked the obvious question in this situation. Could you help me out a little bit? Please." The tears had been temporarily blocked, and now I was being looked up at from below by the huge and glistening wet puppy dog eyes that had always made my heart melt before. "Alas, I don't have such an opportunity. I have a very limited budget," I said. "I once had a good business, but I had to sell it when my bitch ex-wife demanded half of it." Sandy sulked and hung her head, either out of sudden shame or disappointment that she couldn't make another profit at my expense. I had to spend a lot of money to buy this apartment and live near my new office. I earn enough now, but with all the expenses, I can't save much, and I only have one luxury that I enjoy. Sandy's ears perked up at the word luxury, and she looked up, a glint of hope in her eyes this time. I continued. "I have a female neighbor in this condo. She comes and sleeps with me whenever I want for $200. This lady is a widow, and she and I have reached a nice arrangement that suits us both." Sandy's wet face showed a complex range of emotions. She didn't quite know where I was going with this yet. Well, I didn't pull the cat by the balls, especially since I didn't have one in my apartment, and initiated my ex into the details of the agreement. "Even so, my monthly sex budget is only $1,600, and for that money she visits and pleasures me twice a week. Well, I can offer you the same amount if you'll replace her in my bed." Now there was an indignant, almost righteous shock on Sandy's face. "I'm sorry for such an obscene offer, but honestly, you can't expect me to give up sex just to help you." I shrugged. I knew my ex was desperate enough that only the most extreme case could make her come to me with a request. I guess she and the asshole were in a bind. "I'm not asking for an answer right now. I want you to discuss it with Jed and get back to me later." I gave her a small reprieve and a grace period. It was 3 days before she came back. "I'm ready to give you sexual release at, 8 times a month for $1,600. I really need the money," she mumbled, her head low. "Okay, but I have 3 conditions," I warned her. Sandy raised her head warily and looked at me. "First, I don't like to do this behind Jed's back, so he'll have to be in the living room the whole time you're in my bedroom, so I know he knows exactly how much time you're spending with me." I bent the first finger on my left hand. "Secondly, I will always wear a condom every time we have sex. That's really all I want." I showed Sandy the 3 bent fingers on my hand. Those 3 conditions were important because I wanted my pound of flesh to make up for all the times Jed the shithead had shamelessly hornswoggled me. "I guess we'll have to agree to your terms," Sandy said with a sour face, and so quietly that I could barely hear her. "Very good." I rubbed my hands together. "So tomorrow you'll both come here to my apartment and I'll open the door and let you in. Then I'll fix Jed a drink and I'll go to the bedroom and you take off all your clothes, give them to Jed, and follow me. I want you to go into the bedroom completely naked," I demanded, letting her go. When I opened the door the next day, I saw the 2 of them standing there, nervous. Jed had the strength to look me in the eye, though, when he followed his wife into the living room after my inviting gesture, and then sat down in the chair next to Sandy, who was waiting from foot to foot. "I suppose you'd like to wet your throat, wouldn't you, Jed?" I suggested in a neutral tone. "I have some whiskey. I think that was your favorite drink." Jed, apparently considering himself a gourmet, had a particular respect for the fine whiskey I used to keep in my cabinet. On the days when that skunk was sleeping with my then-wife, Sandy, he'd treat himself to my whiskey, too. Yeah, yes, Jed said, looking away for some reason. Well, I poured him the cheapest whiskey I could find legally. I had to go to 3 stores in the neighborhood before I found the kind of hard liquor that even street hobos would refuse. I hope this throat lozenge gives Jed's brain a good kick in the ass to make up for the moral suffering he's about to endure. All right, I'm out of here. Sandy, you remember exactly how to get into the bedroom. I winked at her and went in first. A minute later, Sandy entered the bedroom, naked as she should be, and turned to close the door behind her. Uh-oh, don't, I muttered warningly, waving my index finger. Leave it open. I want you to feel safe. What if I start doing something you don't want me to? Then you can call Jed to save you. She left the door open and walked over to the bed. My apartment is pretty small, and I was sure that even if we spoke in a whisper in the bedroom, Jed would still catch every word we said. I gave Sandy an instruction. Turn around. It's been a long time since I've seen you naked. As she turned around, front to Jed, back to me, I felt a slight stirring in my loins. Of course, I'd prepared for my performance by taking the magic blue pill beforehand. The prelude to our show was so long and shrill that I wondered how Jed hadn't lost his temper in the living room and stormed into the bedroom. It should be considered, however, that in all the time I had been relentlessly entertaining Sandy, I hadn't said a single derogatory word to Jed. At first, of course, she held back as best she could, trying to be less noisy. But I'd been married to her for 9 years and knew exactly where and how to push the right buttons. When it was done and Sandy was sprawled on the bed, barely breathing, I told her she could take her time getting ready, then pulled on my shorts and threw on my robe and left the bedroom. I had been sitting in the living room across from Jed for a good 15 minutes when she finally emerged from the bedroom, still completely naked, on shaky legs and with a bunch of love hickeys and bites, in which there was no love on my part. Jed, who was decently dazed by this time, staggered over and stood up and handed her his clothes, before collapsing back into his chair with his arms around his head. I could smell the rage in the high-pitched amber he exhaled, but I knew almost certainly that there was nothing he could do to keep from losing his trusty $400 a week. I stood up, took out my wallet, pulled out 10 20s, and placed them on the table right in front of Jed's nose. "Count it to make sure," I demanded. He raised his head and stared at me with bloodshot eyes that were angry enough to make me angry. "You're taking advantage of my difficult financial situation to have my wife. What vile thing can you get up to?" he mumbled with a tongue that did not move very obediently, and his voice was full of anger and despair. "Well, we're no different here," I countered. "You took my wife to bed while she was married to me, and I'm going to have a little fling with yours while she's married to you. Law of world balance, man." I went to my mini cabinet and splashed myself some excellent scotch, not at all the kind Jed drowned his sorrows in, then went back to my seat and continued. "The difference is that my wife was valued at $1.3 million at the time she divorced me. Her value was much higher while Sandy remained my wife. And your wife is worth $200, not a dime more. That's a huge drop in assets, isn't it? Besides, I wasn't doing my dirty deeds behind your back. While I didn't have the opportunity to stop tooting my own horn because I found out about it ex post facto, you, on the other hand, sat in the front row today and heard everything with your own ears. Once again, after savoring the great whiskey sliding down my gullet in a scalding stream, I logically concluded, as you can see, I'm not looking for confrontation at all. I offered you real help to the best of my ability. I really don't have any extra money, and I'm giving Sandy exactly the same money for sex that I was paying my roommate. However, I shrugged, you can still refuse if you want, and I'll never tell another living soul about this day, not even the Pope in confession." When Sandy reappeared in the living room, fully dressed, Jed, exhausted from the scotch soda, grabbed the money off the table, stuffed it in his pocket, and immediately stood up, trying to stay upright as much as possible. "Sandy, I'm sorry about the bite marks," I apologized sincerely. "I guess the fact that you fell into my arms after all these years has reawakened the passion that once possessed me. I'm sorry, but I didn't realize I still had such feelings for you." Seeing the couple off, I reminded Sandy before opening the door. So, we meet again Saturday, and if you can make it through the night, well, then I guess Jed can stay home and you can get double pay. As I shut the door, I thought, it's a damn good feeling to know that even though it was just me and Sandy having sex, Jed got fucked that day too.